authors have tried to create a system in the Lankavatara by making each paragraph somewhat connected in meaning with the preceding as well as the succeeding one. But one can at once detect that there is something quite constrained or far-fetched about the attempt. If this, however, is to be done successfully, the whole arrangement as it stands of the paragraphs must be radically altered. And this redaction is possible only by picking up and gathering together cognate passages which are found promiscuously scattered throughout the text. When for the first time a kind of system would be brought into the text. As the present form stands, passages of various connotations are juxtaposed, and a heading indicating one of the ideas contained in them is given to the whole section, thus artificially separating it from the rest. Gunabhadra has done the wisest thing by simply designating the entire sutra as the gist of the Buddha's teaching. The chapter divisions in Buddharuchi are sometimes more or less rational, while we find 4 or 5 subdivisions made into one chapter in Sikshananda as well as in the Sanskrit. In this case, one Buddharuchi section expounds generally one main idea in prose which is abridged at the end in metric form. To be exact, for example, the chapter entitled Anatyata, which makes up the 3rd chapter both in Sikshananda and in the Sanskrit text, is subdivided in Buddharuchi into 5 sections or chapters. The first subdivided chapter, on Buddhasita, treats of 15 different subjects, none of which make any direct reference to Buddhasita. This title, therefore, does not at all indicate the contents of the chapter except in a most comprehensive way. 15 subjects treated in this Buddharuchi chapter on Buddhasita are as follows. The will body, the 5 deadly sins, Buddhata, the sameness of all the Buddhas _ that not a word was uttered for preaching by the Buddha during his long life. Being and non-being, the experience fact and preaching about it. False discriminations, language and meaning, the 3 kinds of wisdom, the 9 changes taught by the philosophers, the 9 fetters and the true understanding, the relation between false discriminations and existence, that the world is a mere name, and suchness and preaching about it. Each subject treated here is expounded in prose as well as in verse. From this the reader can see how diversified are the topics tread, and yet there is something more or less common running underneath them. Of the rest of the 5 sub-chapters in Buddharuchi, the one on Dharmakaya can be further divided into 2 sections, each of which is composed of prose and verse. Except these 2 sub-chapters on Buddhasita and Dharmakaya, all the chapters in Buddharuchi consist regularly of prose and verse parts. The 6th chapter in Sikshananda and the Sanskrit on momentariness, nirvana, etc. is divided in Buddharuchi into 4 sub-chapters: Buddhata, Pathakadama, Gangananda, and Kajalika. Each of these consists normally of 2 sections, one in prose and the other in verse, showing that ONCTQPIC of thought occupies one sub-chapter. The Tiktan Lankavatara No. 1, which Jean Raleigh agrees with THC Sanskrit, the chapter corresponding to Nirma IJ. Ika has no titich of its own. Taking all in all, the chapter divisions of the Lankavatara in whatever version are, to say the least, arbitrary and of later elaboration. A good practical way of reading the sutra without displacing the contents from their original setting will be to isolate in most cases one prose part with its metric repetition from another sich part. Anna. This will naturally cut up the text into many short independent sections. Point 1. There are some prose paragraphs without any corresponding gatha-section, for instance, in the earlier part of GM. iabhadra and in the 2nd chapter of the other versions. Gunabhadra, when thus treated, will yield a little over FIF separate, individual chapters. The impression one gets after perusing the sutra carefully is that such independent statements dealing with the principal ideas of Mahayana Buddhism at the time when the sutra was compiled. were notes taken down by the author without any intention of arranging them in order. As was the case with the Pali Nikayas, each of these independent paragraphs was perhaps a complete sutra in itself. Later, perhaps when there was a need for editing them under a title, they came to be known as the Lankavatara, or the Buddhapravacanahridaya. So long as we do not know how the Mahayana Sutras were produced, all that we can say about their compilation has the nature of conjecture. Were the sutras compiled one after another in time succession? Did one presuppose the existence of another, so that we can definitely trace the development of ideas backed by such documents? Or did they develop in different localities, each one without knowing another? Is it possible as a matter of historical fact to arrange the Mahayana Sutras in time sequence? Does logical development always coincide with historical events? That is to say, a fact and syllogism one. Does the one always and by nature precede, or follow the other? Until these questions are historically solved, there will be many problems unsolved in connection with the makeup of the Lankavatara Sutra. That the first introductory chapter, in which Ravara invites the Buddha to Lanka to discourse on the truth inwardly realized by him, is a later addition, is also shown in the relation between the Prmmt and the verse. LØNG this chapter. There is no such relation whatever between the two portions as is to be found in other parts of the sutra. That is, there is here no verse part that corresponds to or repeats the sense of the prose. The whole chapter is one complete piece. There is nothing fragmentary about it. It is altogether different in tone and style from the other parts of the sutra. The way the theme is developed and the style of the writing are quite distinct. In this respect, the chapter on meat eating resembles this introductory one, although it has the verse part in correspondence with the prose. The meat eating chapter may be a later addition, also, in spite of its being found in Gunabhadra. It does not seem to fit in perfectly with the main part of the sutra. Did the author of the Lankavatara just put it in at the end as a kind of appendix? Not standing in any organic relationship with the sutra proper, where highly metaphysical subjects are treated. And later did it accidentally get incorporated into the body of the sutra as forming a part of it? Now we come to consider the last chapter entitled in the Sanskrit edition, Sagathakam, which occupies a special position in the structure of the Lankavatara. As the title indicates, it is composed entirely of gathas. In the Sanskrit there are 884 couplets taking up about 1/4 of the whole text. Of these, over 200 are found in the main text itself. Therefore, about 680 gathas are newly added ones. LØNG Sikshānanda. These repetitions are systematically excluded from its gatha chapter, while in Bodharuchi everything is thrown in and with something more. There are 890 quatrains in Bodharuchi and 656 in Sikshānanda, showing the relative amount of stanzas in each, as 4 Chinese lines are generally equivalent to 1 Sanskrit stanza. As for the contents and their arrangement, there is utter chaos in the Sagathakam. No doubt they chiefly concern the same themes as treated in the main text, but there are some original theses, and it is often hard to see why and how they came to be thrown in here. To read the Sagathakam properly, therefore, it must be cut up into so many small portions, sometimes taking just one solitary sloka as expressing a complete idea, i.e., as a sort of aphorism. When this cutting up process is brought to an end, we see that the Sagathakam, which appears on the surface as one solid chain of gathas, is nothing but a heap of rubbish and gems. How did this conglomeration come to be affixed to the Lankavatara? Why do we find so many gathas taken from the sutra proper and mixed up with the rest? And the way they are mixed is most strange. Seeing that while some are taken in bodily just as they are found in the sutra itself, others are broken up and interspersed fantastically among the rest. Was this done intentionally? Or did it happen just so? Does the Sagatharkam, suggest an earlier origin than the sutra, in which the gatha part was later elaborated in the prose in the way of commentary. But there is some reason to suppose that the Sagatharkam, as a whole and in detail, is later than the sutra proper. Partly because it contains some historical matter which has no place in it, but chiefly because the thought expressed here seems to be more definite and developed than that in the body of the sutra. Taking all in all, the relation between the Sagatharkam and the rest of the sutra is a mystery because we have as yet reached no sure ground in the historical .3 of Mahayana literature in India. This much we may say, that the Sagatharkam can easily be made into an independent text expounding the principal truths of the Mahayana philosophy. It reminds one of a notebook in which a student of the Mahayana took down some of the more important ideas as he learned them orally from his master, and in which at the same time he also put some other matter for his own benefit, though not necessarily in close relationship with the main contents of the notebook. In this respect, the Sagatharkam shares the characteristics of the sutra as a whole. It may be noticed that Sikhananda calls this part of the text the chapter of gathas and Bodharuchi simply, general chapter. While the Sanskrit edition is prefaced, listen to the jewel-made gathas preached in the Itkavata 1-footer sutra, and free from the net of the erroneous views, and containing the wonderful Mahayana teaching, and concludes with this. This may be rendered into English. Thus is completed the Mahayana Sutra, the noble orthodox Dharma, called Lankavatara, together with the gathas. According to the postscript thus translated, the gatha-section does not seem to have any special title for itself. For if Sagatharkam means that which is together with the gatha, the designation must be regarded as applying to the whole sutra of Lankavatara and not to this last section exclusively made up with gathas. What helps this interpretation is the Tibetan postscript, which reads. This generally coincides with the Sanskrit except the one most important phrase, IQ, which may be Sanskritized yathalabdam. This means, as far as obtainable, or, as is available, which in the present case points to the possible existence of more gathas or text belonging to the Lankavatara proper, showing at the same time the incompleteness of the sutra as we have it now. Yathalabdam is also found at the end of the Yamanjufrimulakalpa, which is one of the sutras having no usual sutra ending, and A1sa at the end of the, which to all appearance is a complete sutra. Incidentally, reference may be made to certain lines in the Sagatharkam, which are often quoted by followers of Shin Buddhism as teaching Amitabha's land of bliss and also predicting the rise of Nagarjuna. The lines are, the matured Buddhas, and manifested Buddhas, and beings, and Bodhisattvas, and their lands they are in the 10 quarters. The flowing Buddhas, the reality Buddhas, the transformed Buddhas, and the manifested ones they all issue from Amitabha's land of happiness. Single quote. Further, my vehicle of self-realization is beyond the attainment of the philosophers. Single quote opening square bracket. Asked Mahamati, pray tell me, after the teacher passes, who would keep this up? Single quote. After the time when Sugata is passed away and no more, O Mahamati, know that there will be one who can hold up the eye of the Dharma. In the southern part of this country called Vedali there will be a bhikshu of great and excellent reputation known as Nagavaya, who will destroy the one-sided view of being and non-being. He will, while in the world, make manifest the unsurpassable Mahayana, and attaining the stage of joy, pass to the land of happiness. The Sanskrit text we have, instead of Nagarjuna, Nagavaya, and of course we do not know whether they are one person, or whether there is a mistake on the part of the scribe. From these passages alone it is difficult to infer anything historical concerning the age of the Lankavatara as a whole. and also its possible relation to the doctrine of Amitabha's land of bliss. Lane short, the Lankavatara Sutra may be divided as regards its textual construction into the following 6 specifically definable parts. 1. The Revolver chapter. 2. The section devoted to the enumeration of the so-called 108 questions and 108 terms. 3. The prose section in which no verses are found. 4. The prose and verse section, which may be subdivided. A. The part devoted to a discourse carried on principally in verse, for instance, paragraphs on the system of Vijayathanas. B. The part containing ideas fully developed both in prose and verse, for example, meat-eating chapter. E. The part containing ideas fully discussed in prose and supposedly recapitulated in verse, as in the greater parts of the text. 5. The Daral I section. 6. The Sagathakam. Single quote. 3. Examples of the textual differences. This is not the place to dwell extensively on the textual differences between the various versions of the Lankavatara. For to do so would involve many questions which properly do not fall into an introductory part such as we intend this section to be. No doubt a detailed comparison of the different translations with the Sanskrit text, as well as with each other, will be instructive from the point of view of text criticism and also from that of the history of Chinese Buddhist literature as translations. But as the writer wants to limit his attention chiefly to the inner significance of the sutra as an exposition of Zen Buddhism, and also as a most valuable text of the Mahayana, let us be content with the following extracts from the 3 Chinese translations and the Sanskrit text. A comparison of these extracts, one which may be considered as characteristic of each text, though they have been selected somewhat at random, will throw much light on the nature of the respective literatures. I have tried to give a literal English translation of the Chinese as far as it could be made readable. Sung. 1. Further, O Mahamati, the 5 categories are appearance, name, discrimination, suchness, and right knowledge. Way. 1. Further, O Mahamati, the 5 categories are appearance, name, discrimination, suchness, and right knowledge. Sung. 2. O Mahamati, appearance is such as is manifested in places, forms, colors, figures, etc. This is called appearance. Way. 2. O Mahamati, what is appearance? Appearance is what is seen in colors, forms, figures, which are distinctive and not alike. This is called appearance. Sung. 3. As when having such and such appearances, things are called aja, etc. And by no other designation, this is known as name. Way. 3. O Mahamati, depending upon this appearing of things, there arises discrimination, saying that, this is a jar, this is a horse, a cow, a sheep, etc. That, this is such and such, this is no other thing, this, O Mahamati, is called name. 4. Mind and what belongs to mind, whereby various names are set up and all kinds of appearances are brought out into view, such as a jar, etc. This is called discrimination. 4. O Mahamati, depending upon these objects thus named, their characteristics are distinguished and made manifest, whereby such various names are set up as cow, sheep, horse, etc. This is called the discriminating of mind and objects belonging to mind. 5. That name, that appearance. They are ultimately unattainable. Opening square bracket. When there is no intelligence from beginning to end. When there is no mutual conditioning in all things, and when discrimination which is not real is put away, this is known as suchness. 5. O Mahamati, when one surveys names and appearances even down to atoms, one never sees a single reality, all things are unreal. For they are due to the discrimination stirred up in one's deceiving mind. Ang. 1. Further, O Mahamati, the 5 categories are appearance, name, discrimination, suchness, and right knowledge. Sanskrit. 1. Further, O Mahamati, the 5 categories are appearance, name, discrimination, suchness, and right knowledge. Ang. 2. Of these, by appearance is meant that which we see, each differs in color, form, figure, etc. This is known as appearance. Sanskrit. 2. Then, O Mahamati, by appearance is meant that which is known as form, shape, distinctive, figure, image, mark, etc. They are seen as appearances. Ang. 3. Depending on these appearances, names such as jars, etc. are set up, saying, this is such and such, this is no other, this is known as name. Sanskrit. 3. From these appearances, ideas are formed such as a jar, etc. saying, this is it, this is no other, this is name. 4. By mind and what belongs to mind, various names are set up, all kinds of appearances are brought out into view, this is known as discrimination. 4. O Mahamati, what is known as mind or as belonging to mind, whereby a name is pronounced as indicating appearance, or objects of like nature, are recognized. That is discrimination. 5. That name, that appearance. They are all ultimately non-existent. They are only due to the discrimination by a perturbed mind of things mutually related. When one thus surveys the world until the disappearance of intelligence takes place, one has what is known as suchness. 5. That names and appearances are ultimately unattainable as realities, when intelligence one is put away, and that these things are not recognized and discriminated in their aspect of mutuality, this is suchness.